Hey everybody, it's Alex Miller at Capnion here. In today's video, I'm going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, as well as the agent-based workflow paradigm you might use when you're building an application that involves the use of a large language model. I'm just being a little silly. What do these things have in common? There's a bit of a debate out there about, is prompt engineering a real thing? Is it gonna last, or is it like getting really good at turning the crank on some of those old cars back in the day? I don't quite want to pass judgment, but I think people underestimated some things, and I'm going to give you guys an example. So I have a silly, basic Dungeons and Dragons toy where you can go in a tavern, which is where all Dungeons and Dragons adventures usually begin. Talk to the bartender, talk to other patrons. I'd emphasize this thing is very basic and it's built on top of the ChatGPT API. Right now, it's got some problems. I'll go into what they are in a second. Over the next few weeks, I am going to try to make it better. And in these videos, I'm going to talk to you about the things I've been doing. Did they work or not? How much difference did they make? And then how do they fit into this agent-based workflow idea? I'd also add there's probably going to be an event I'm planning in early June. It's going to cover the same material. Agent-based workflow, what is that? That's kind of the question I would like to answer. I wouldn't say I'm an unparalleled expert on this topic, but I would also say I don't think such an expert exists. This is something that's being invented right now. Maybe the service I would really like to provide to you is, if you were to go reading some of the stuff on this topic, it's pretty dense. And I think that's kind of a tragedy, and it's got to evolve anyway. And I have a pretty clear thesis I'd like to share with you about what is the point in thinking this way? What is the philosophy that underlies all these often much more kind of technical, fancy sounding settings where people talk about this? And I'm going to do it in the context of this Dungeons and Dragons game. I'll put a link in the comments. So I'm going to point out one problem with my not very good Dungeons and Dragons text-based game that I have right now is that it's kind of difficult to enforce reality. If you have a well-behaved user and they're just acting as one should in a tavern, everything kind of behaves as it normally should in a tavern. And so the dungeon master in this game, which is ChatGPT in another form, is going to do a pretty good job telling a story that kind of fits within the setting in a reasonable way. It's tough, though. The story with LLM is always that it's capable of too many things. Let's say I'm a barbarian and my skill set is really hitting stuff with a sword. I can't cast spells. But then if I tell ChatGPT, hey, I'm casting a spell, it's just going to give me a description of casting spells. And that's, I should add, if that goes through the normal prompts I am using as part of this little toy. There's a really obvious thing you could do to start working on this problem, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell you about it. Well, you know what API you could use to figure out in an automated way if something is allowed to happen in the world of Dungeons and Dragons? Well, ChatGPT would also be a great tool for that. And so this immediately leads you into, you are now using ChatGPT in two different ways in an application. You're going to have two different sets of prompts that determine how things get used. So one is, so you're the bartender and you're a game master playing Dungeons and Dragons, and the player said this, how do you respond? And the other one is, okay, the player said this, do they have the ability to do whatever it is they want to do in the game? You can also go into looking at things like, well, on one side, this is supposed to be text that's immediately going to get reproduced by the application. On the other side, I might want something more formatted. It's going back into the code a yes or a no, or 0 or 1. It's going to be used to make another decision. What's the point here? In the guts, I'm just using ChatGPT. But then, in practice, I'm using ChatGPT in the code with some radically different window dressing. And I have two themes. I have this, now you are the bartender, and then I have also make a judgment about if this is allowed. And the idea of these agent-based workflows is that if I have these kind of different functions with these different themes, I shouldn't be redoing all my prompts every time or something like that. I should have structure and tools in my code that allow me to function in a way that's more like, hey, rule master, is this permitted? Yes or, and then I don't have to say every time that it should be a yes or no answer. Yeah. Hey, bartender, I need the text of your reply. I can streamline these things a lot. I can keep myself out of trouble, not putting the wrong thing in the wrong place. And in general, I can get a lot of great value out of LLM. Has worlds of stuff in it. It can do a lot of different things, but I can't necessarily get them all in the same prompt. And probably, once again, from like a bookkeeping nice code standpoint, I wouldn't want to. And this is where you get to the agent-based workflow, this blob of code that asks about my rules questions. That's an agent. This other blob of code that pretends to be the tavern keeper and generates dialogue is an agent. The philosophy is I should be structuring my code around the idea that these are, even though at the end I just go to the ChatGPT API, I should be structuring my code. These are two circumscribed things. And as I said, I'm gonna do it for this toy game. I don't know how far I'll dive. There's tools. There's a philosophy of doing an agent-based workflow. There's tools for enabling it. I don't know how far I go, what kind of time I have, but I'm gonna get my hands dirty and make some videos on it over the next few weeks. I hope to give you an idea about an agent-based workflow that is tangible and about solving practical problems, and it's going to help you understand if you see a more gobbledygooky definition. Well, what's the point? Why are we talking about this? What is the good in it? What's it about? So stay tuned, folks, and have a great day.